Hello, wrenches. Welcome to the Wrench Turners Podcast, 10 Mil Mastery Edition. I'm your host, Mr. Joshua Taylor, founder and CEO of WrenchTurners.online, a business providing digital products and services to mechanics and service leaders everywhere. Digital products like the Wrench Turners Wellness Survey, a product that helps service leaders diagnose mechanics' challenges in their working environment, and the reverse interview, content that drives mechanics to your dealership. If you're interested in finding out more about products, services, or potentially being a podcast guest, please reach out to me at leader@justworkhard.com. On today's show, my guests are Marshall Sheldon, Russell Wickham, and Richard Mueller. On today's episode, we pontificate the challenges facing technicians in the service drive. They aren't being listened to. Well, what do we do about it? Well, the four of us discuss that challenge and how we would deal with it. Let's get into it.
All right. Compose myself a little bit here. Okay. What I want to do, instead of posing a topic question, well, it's kind of a topic question, and I'll let you guys decide what it is and what to do with it. But one of the things that regularly comes up, and I've said this before, but I'm going to bring it up to you guys to try and pose how to come over it. So during the survey, the thing that comes up the most is that technicians are not listened to on the service drive. So I am constantly trying to find ways to make content, to help through coaching, through consulting, talking with service leaders, how to improve their shop, like we discussed earlier on, special service tools and cleanliness and so on and so forth. If you are in a shop, so put yourself, say you're not in the shop that you're in right now, okay? Think about a hypothetical shop that you're in. You are a 15-year veteran technician. All right, not necessarily a veteran, but a 15-year in the trade. Okay, you are level 3 certified. So whatever brand that you happen to be in, you've done your beginner training, your intermediate training, your advanced level training. You are not yet a doctor of the house, but you are getting awfully close to it. So you've got your level 3 complete. 15 years in the trade. You've been at the same store for 15 years. Okay, you're in a store that's got at least 20 techs. So you've got at least 6 service advisors that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. The entire shop basically prioritizes not being listened to in the service drive at the top of their survey, meaning it's the worst thing in the shop. It's the most important thing that the service leader needs to correct. You, as that technician, what would you do to try and improve your communication so that the service advisor understands you better? Russell, I'd like to hear from you first.
Loaded question.
Very loaded question.
It depends on if they're willing to have a conversation with me or not. Because the way I communicate, I get face to face. We have all these machines and everything that you can send messages and all that stuff, but you can't get body language. And majority of our communication is through body language. I think only 15% of the spoken word is understood. It's when you actually see what the person is communicating, whether you see the look in their eyes, whether the light comes on or not. And then I'm gifted that I can break technical talk down to layman. So I can walk up and say, your canuter valve is failing to communicate with your whatchamacallit, and the widget is not performing correctly. They're going to stare at me with a blank look in my face, where I can say, so we have 2 modules that control a motor, and module A is called the body control module. It takes inputs from the switches, and then it's telling the window motor module to go up and down. But in that communication wire in between the two, there's no communication. If their light still doesn't come on, then I'll draw them a picture. But the challenge is when I've done my part and they still won't communicate. You know, I can go up and I can ask all day long, when you get a noise complaint in, can you give me a call so that I can ride with the customer? And they still won't call. It's worthless. So some people have a good process, and they follow that process, and there's good communication. Some people were never taught a process, and they're willing to learn. And then some people have a bad process, and it's the way they've always done it, and get out of their face. If it's one of those latter, I'm already on the job board looking for a new job. So, you know, where I'm at, I have 2 advisors that do a really good job of communicating. And then I have a third one that he's just biding his time until he can retire next year. So one of the advisors that does a good job of communicating, I've worked on building a relationship with this person so that I can communicate with that person even for dealing with this third advisor's customers, because they work as a team up front. They all get paid out of the same pot. So, you know, if one will pick up the slack for the others. They all know this one particular person's trouble, and they work together to take care of the customer.
That's a lot of weight on their shoulders still. That's a lot of weight on their shoulders. And I can understand, you know, if those 2 advisors weren't able to communicate as effectively as they are, and they happen to be in this challenging, like one of the shops that were part of the survey was a very challenging shop. They're very, very challenging shop, and the leader is going to have a lot of uphill battles that they're going to challenge. There's just no listening going on. And I think the stress on the service advisors who are winning is even higher because they are winning and they're picking up the slack of those that are losing, which then puts a deficit on the technicians who are having to communicate to the ones that are slacking off or incapable or not educated or not trained. That's a big challenge. And I'm happy for you that you're in a place where you've got at least 2, you know, a much higher percentage rate, 2 out of 3 that are listening, capable of learning, capable of communicating back. If you were to identify one of the things that you just said, because you said about 4 in there that you do specifically, what is the most powerful one to help you feel heard?
I actually am going to use an example. Service advisor came out, gave me a customer pay transmission ticket, came back about 15 minutes later and said, "You're covered up with warranty work. I'm going to take that customer pay and give it to another tech in the shop who doesn't do his training and who, anyway, I won't get into the bitterness." But anyway, I stewed on that all day, and the longer the day went, the more pissed off I got. So the next morning, I went in and I pulled the advisor aside and I said, I want to communicate with you so you understand how I see it from my perspective. I'm back here buried in warranty. Now, I understand you need to get the job through the shop. I understand what you're trying to do. But when you say something like, well, you're buried under warranty, so I'm going to take this customer pay away, it makes me feel like I'm getting screwed because there went 10 hours of work that I could have made a killing on to a guy who won't do his training, And so he's being rewarded for not doing his training while I'm struggling doing all this warranty. So even if you do need to take it away, don't say that around me because it makes me upset. And she was like, okay, I really understand, seeing that from your perspective, why it would be upsetting to you. And so that was the kind of communication where we were able to work through an issue by I expressed how it makes me feel, and she recognized that. I expressed I'm not trying to make her job more difficult. We're just trying to work together as a team, and it was building that team aspect that was allowed successful communication. The advisors make their paychecks off the work we do. If they're not going to team work with us, they're not going to make a paycheck. We're not going to make a paycheck. We're all going to be unhappy, and the shop's going to suffer. If you can help them understand that what you're saying is to help them be successful, then if they're a good person, they're going to say, yeah, let's work together, as opposed to working at odds with each other.
Awesome. Okay, Marshall, same circumstance, buddy. You're in a position where there's a challenge. Russell gave a great example there. He's posed with a challenge, stewed on it. Thankfully, didn't stew on it so badly that he pulled the trigger on given notice, but stewed on it long enough to realize that there was an opportunity to win, and actually pulled somebody aside and said, this is how I feel. I don't want to make your day miserable, but you made my day miserable by saying this. In not necessarily that circumstance, what would you say is one thing for you that would help you either be, and actually, sorry, let me rephrase this more specifically. What is one thing that a service advisor could do, and or what you can do to make sure you feel heard?
Yeah, so one thing I know I teach my apprentices is this, and Russell, you're doing exactly what I would do, is you have to use words that convey your point, which is what you're doing or what you did makes me feel this way. And if they come to you with what you did makes me feel that way, you have to have a confirmation that you heard them correctly. And I feel like that's really difficult we are a lot more mature than, say, our apprentices are, and it doesn't hurt me, my pride or anything like that, to point out my feelings to someone else. But a lot of younger people, they struggle with pointing out their feelings to other people, making themselves feel vulnerable. And so I feel like that's exactly how I would have approached a situation. Hey, what you did really makes me feel this way, this kind of way, however that looks like. And you always want to, I feel like you always want to add a possible solution for next time. Like, hey, if you could, with me personally, if you could say it this way to me, then that would work better for me. And if there's anything I can do for you that would help, and then it's kind of a two-way street, and it's not all about you and it's not all about them. It's a 50-50,
Awesome.
And that's how I would have approached it too. So,
Richard?
So this was the whole shop, right? Whole shop had a communication issue.
Yeah, basically what I'm bringing up is this one particular shop scored the surveys. You guys all did an alpha for me, and I appreciate that. But the Shop Life 20 scored at a 3, 0, 1, 2, or 3. And one of the questions is, do you feel listened to by the service drive? And this particular shop is the only shop that I had where the end result, the average of all the techs in the shop was 0. Not 0.1, not 0 point something, not 1 point whatever. It was dead 0. So I want to help the techs out there that feel like they aren't being listened to in the service drive. So what's one thing that a service advisor can do, or what's one thing that you as a technician can do, or both, to make sure that you feel heard when you are speaking with a service advisor?
Yell at them. No. So the thing is, so for that particular shop, my solution would be you would need to have the support of the entire technician group. Don't show up to work. One day, just one day, the entire shop does not show up to work. They'll listen after that. But in order to, I've had several different advisors, and they all have strengths and weaknesses, just like technicians have strengths and weaknesses. Like you've all said, communication is the key. You have to talk to your advisors. If an advisor isn't doing their job, what are they there for? If they're always coming back and grabbing you, they're like to talk to the customer, to deal with the customer. What is the service advisor there for? I was listening to it's a service drive podcast, and somebody had called in and talked about the impending service advisor shortage. And it's the attitude was they're not important. Service advisors were added after the fact. It used to be customers would come up and they would talk directly to the mechanic or the technician, explain their issues, and then dealerships got involved and they created the service advisor drive, the service drive, and the service advisor to be that go-between between the technician and the customer. If the service advisor is continually grabbing the technician to explain to the customer, it's time to let that advisor go, or try and train them up. If you've done due diligence and done your training and they're still refusing to step up to the plate and do their job and communicate with their customers and manage their customers, that's the biggest issue I have at my location is customer management. They're not managing their customers. I try and like the other guys have said, I've always tried to communicate. Like if I write my story to reflect everything that I've done on the vehicle. If it's too technical for the customer to understand, I'll break it down for the service advisor. But if I find that multiple technicians are continually having the same issue with a single service advisor, then we know that it's not a problem on the technician side. We know it's a problem with the service advisor, and we need to either address it or find somebody else for that position. So that's service advisors are supposed to be the go-between. They're supposed to be the buffer between the customer and the technician, and hope like a good service advisor, the customer will come into the service drive and they'll know the customer's name. They've done all their due diligence. They've wagged the dog. They know the customer's name. They know their kids. They don't even really talk about the vehicle. They're talking about like, hey, what brings you in today? And they address all those issues. But when it comes to there's a breakdown in communication between the service drive. It's usually the service drive and parts and the shop. Those three integrate together. If there's a breakdown anywhere, you got to find where it is and fix it. And if it comes down to personnel clashing, then you got to figure out who you're going to keep, right? That's the unfortunate part. Like there's been multiple posts about toxic employees, and you have to catch that quickly. It doesn't matter if they're a high performer. I think John Fraser who had that post about toxic high performers. You still got to get rid of them. You can't. It doesn't matter, once the well's poisoned, you can't. You got to get rid of it. You can't. It doesn't matter how much they bring to the table. It's time to move on. But yeah,
nothing kills shop morale faster than tolerating toxicity.
Yeah,
I had something to add.
Jump in,
Marshall. Go ahead, and then I'll go after him.
Okay. So, if I was talking directly to a technician, if there was a technician in that position, Joshua, that you were talking about with said shop, they're in this situation, and say it's one of my buddies, and he was like, dude, what do I do? How do I help fix this problem that we have at our shop? If I was in that position and I was trying to give them advice, from my point of view, when I come into a new shop, I always find the technician that has the influence. There's a technician in every shop that has the influence, that has the ear of whoever's in charge, the service manager, the branch manager, whatever, somebody that can do something. And there is one technician in every shop at least that has the influence to make things happen. Or you can tell them something knowing that they will go to the service manager and say, hey, we've got a problem here with said technician and or multiple technicians that needs to be addressed, or we're going to lose a bunch of technicians, because that person typically that has the influence in the shop, they care about the shop. That's why they have the influence, because the other technicians look to them as a leader in the store to make things happen or help facilitate the things happening. So I would say if you are a technician in a shop that's having a problem like that, there is a technician there that has influence, that may not be utilizing it, but is the leader in the store, on the floor. And I would say you should go to that person and say, hey, I'm having this problem. Joe is having that same problem. Bob is having that same problem. And we need you to help us figure out a way to get our point across the service manager. Like a lot of times I find myself in that position of influence. So, and sometimes you can wear that heavily. So if you're the technician in that shop that has the influence, and you're thinking, oh, I don't want to let everybody down, or it's a heavy crown to bear. That's what being a leader is about, I feel like. It's your responsibility to go handle it. That's why everybody gave you the influence. That's why they gave you the possibility of being the leader. So you're going to have to suck it up and go to the service manager or whoever. Take it as far as you have to, because I know I would. I would go as far as up the chain I had to make it happen, to make the lives of my other technicians more positive. So I was just thinking about that, and I just wanted to throw that point out.
Dude, what's up, Russell?
On the individual level, so you're saying this shop had what, 6 advisors, something like that?
No, I haven't given even close to what the actual shop is. I'm just giving a representation. I can't give too much away.
Okay. Well, then I will choose to use that 6 as an example. I did work in a big shop one time that had a number of advisors. What I found worked the best was to go and talk to the advisors individually, and pick an ally among the advisors. Get to know that person on a personal level. You know, me as a technician knew his name, knew his wife, knew what cars he had, what he really enjoyed about him and what he didn't like. I built a relationship with the person. And then when I had issues, I could talk to him. It's like, hey, this last repair order, when it came in, it was written up this way. But I didn't really understand what the customer complaint was, because, it's missing these steps. Can we do it this way in the future? And because I had a personal relationship with that person, then they actually modified their behavior, because there was a relationship there. I obviously cared about them. At least that's how it appeared to them. And so, they cared about my opinion because I had built a relationship with them. Now there's, the shop that I currently work in, there used to be an advisor that worked here. Everybody hated this particular advisor because there was no working with them. They were that kind of person. And eventually they got moved on. But then we had a character in the shop that started attacking the new advisor that replaced him the same way. Well, that individual, the mechanic, needed to move on. Once that mechanic moved on, so there was 2 toxic individuals. There was a toxic mechanic, a toxic advisor. Once the 2 of them moved on, then we have built a very good team environment here for all parties involved. So I would think that on an individual level for the mechanic, try to build a relationship. I know in the shop we do a lot of bashing. Try to rise above that negativity and build an individual relationship. If you can't work with one, try to work with another until you find and work with these people. If none of them are workable, as Marshall said, go up the chain far as you got to. But usually in a group of, say, 3 to 6, there's at least one person that you can work with.
Okay, cool. So that's all great advice. And where I was leading to is perhaps even more simple than you guys are leading to. I did an assessment on 3 techs. I've done assessments on 3 techs in the last 3 weeks to do coaching with, and none of them use the word respect when talking about advisors. None of them inferred directly or indirectly the word respect. And I think one of our first questions, I think we all ended up with answers that led to some form or another of respect, how we speak. And I think one of the things that's not taught, it's not taught in school, and it's definitely not specifically taught in the shop, and it's not taught in the service drive either, is the understanding of how important respect is. Respect between departments, respect between authority, respect between those of us in the shop. We regularly use sarcasm, dismissive behavior, diminished or demeaning comments, dark humor to those who don't necessarily understand it, threatening language, even when to us it might be just another day at the office. Understanding and respecting the person that we're talking to, especially if it's an advisor, not a tech. I don't think, and I've genuinely not talked to enough service advisors to be able to understand fully, but they are such a different kind of person. A person who can be successful in the service drive is a completely different kind of person than a person that's successful in the shop. And I think as mechanics, we forget that we are different than those folks that are in the service drive, and we don't necessarily give them a chance to be different. Those folks that I've interviewed in the last couple of weeks, again, haven't used the word respect or inferred respect when talking to a service advisor. So if I could say to any of the mechanics out there listening, what's one thing that they can do better tomorrow to make sure that they feel heard, is to make sure that the language, the words, the tone, the body language, the facial expressions all represent, shall we say, an overall tone of respect for the person that you're talking to. You might not understand it, and you may not necessarily agree with it. You may think that the person in front of you doesn't necessarily deserve your respect because they haven't earned it. But in this circumstance, like the shop that I'm kind of inferring to, they need to start giving a bit of respect before they're ever going to get any respect, because there's nothing on the table right now. There's no respect on the table. So one side needs to be the bigger person. Take the high road and start giving some. Even if it's just calm, simple language. Nothing condescending, no offensive language, no diminished value of what the other person is saying. Just be respectful. And I think from a roundabout way, other than Richard's mantra of having the shop walk out, I think fundamentally, respect is going to be the best course of action to try and pull that 0 up to something, so that you as a mechanic team can feel listened to.
Oh no! That's the end of another episode, Wrenches. Thank you for stopping by and having a listen. And for those of you watching, thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. It continues to be an honor every time we get to sit down together, share our knowledge, share our stories, and our life experiences. Hopefully, between the 4 of us and sharing it with the world. Somebody somewhere get something out of it that helps them be happier, healthier, and more productive at work. Remember, folks, to subscribe to the Wrench podcast on your streaming service of choice, whether it's Spotify, Anchor, or here on YouTube. Thank you very much for subscribing. It really helps us grow and get that message out. If you happen to be listening and you have questions, you want to be on the show, questions about products, questions to the team, to the team at 10 Mil Masteries, send me an email to leader@justworkhard.com. Thank you very much for listening. And remember, negative pushes, positive pulls, and always clean your toys before you put them away.